Out of all of Elden Ring's main attributes, there are 5 of them that directly affect the amount of damage that the player character will do: Strength, Dexterity, Intelligence, Faith, and Arcane. As for the way Elden Ring calculates damage, it is both complicated and convoluted, so we will be dealing with that in its own specific video. For now, in the present video, we will focus on the characteristics and details of Faith. Faith in Elden Ring is defined as the attribute required to perform sacred incantations. It also boosts the power and damage of incantations and weapons that scale with this stat. This is the second caster stat that we can find in our list of attributes, and it gives us access to all damage types in the game, as well as many different status types. This is my favorite stat in the game, and it governs your character's devotion and obsession. Let's take a look at everything it can do. The first thing to talk about is the most basic, but also the most important one. Faith is the stat required to wield certain weapons and to cast incantations. Weapons of devotion have faith requirements to meet, as does every incantation in the game. Let's use the Golden Halberd armament and the Flame Cleanse Me incantations as examples. You can see that the halberd has a requirement of 12 faith to wield, while Flame Cleanse Me has the same requirement of 12 faith to cast. If you do not meet these requirements, then you will see that the halberd's damage will be reduced and that your character will not be able to cast the incantation. Unlike when we spoke about strength, when it comes to faith, there are no mechanics in the game that can help you meet these requirements. You need to meet or exceed them using your levels, consumables, or equipment. There is no way around this. Weapon damage scaling is a complicated subject. It is made up of multiple concepts and various calculations. I will be covering all of this in detail in a separate video. For now, the basic notion with faith is that all weapons that have faith scaling will have their damage increased as you level up your faith stat. Damage scaling is determined on a weapon per weapon basis, meaning that each specific weapon has different conditions and each will show you different data. It is important to understand that faith scaling will increase the holy or fire portion of a weapon's damage depending on if you infuse your weapon down the sacred path or the flame art path. I ran the numbers for multiple weapons in order to test the data out, and it is possible to establish different soft caps for the stat. For the scaling data, we will be using a Sacred Longsword plus 25, which has a B scaling in faith. Please be reminded that this data is only for the holy damage portion of the attack rating, as this is the only portion that faith affects. Please take a look at these charts. On the top, you will see the correlation between your faith stat and the total AR of the Sacred Longsword plus 25. In other words, what is the total AR of this weapon on each level of faith. On the bottom, you will see the correlation between your faith stat and the AR increase of the weapon. In other words, how much actual AR we get each time that we level up our faith. As always, it is important to look at the shape of the charts. On the top, you will see that the damage increase is more pronounced in the earlier levels, but as you get to the later levels of faith, the increase begins to flatten out. As we have talked about with every single stat, this is the work of diminishing returns. The more faith you have, the less you get with each level. How much less exactly? Well, let's take a look at the bottom chart. As you can see, the earlier levels give either 4 or 5 AR per level. This is a lot. But then, at about level 20, the increase drops to either 2 or 3 AR per level. This marks the first soft cap of the skill at level 20. Then, it continues to receive the same AR, 2 or 3 points, all the way up to level 50, where it drops again to mostly 1 AR per level. This is the second cap of the skill at level 50. And then, we continue to get 1 AR per level until we hit level 80. From then on, we either get 0 or 1 AR per level with multiple instances of no increases at all. So, this is the third and final soft cap of the skill at level 80. Past this level, it is not worthwhile to level up faith as the returns we get are too few for the investments that we make. Please remember, damage scaling is complicated. This data that I am showing you is specifically for a Sacred Longsword plus 25. Other weapons have different scaling, so they provide different data. That said, the shape of the chart is always roughly the same, so we can establish the 3 soft caps: level 20, level 50, and level 80. As we mentioned before in the introduction of this video, Faith is a caster stat, and that means that it is a basic and very important part of the damage that our incantations will do. The more faith we have, the more damage that our incantations will inflict on our enemies. That being said, we still have to keep in mind the different soft caps that incantation scaling presents among all of the different seals that we have available to cast these incantations. Each and every seal in the game has a faith scaling of some degree, and much like the weapons, each seal presents its own specific data when it comes to incantation scaling. Nevertheless, I have tested these seals, and it is possible to establish a concise set of soft caps that we can follow when we are interested in building a priest character. Please take a look at these charts. Throughout my testing, I have found that the scaling data of the different incantation seals is quite complicated. Different seals produced widely different data based on different reasons. Some of them were expected, while others not so much. After compiling all of the information, I managed to organize all of the seals into 3 general groups: standard seals, hybrid seals, and backloaded seals. Standard seals are those that present standard scaling data. This means that they are affected by diminishing returns, much like all of the other armaments in the game. The more faith you have, the less benefit you get from each point you invest into it. The soft caps that standard seals present fall within the expected parameters. Hybrid seals are those that receive their incantation scaling from 2 different stats. One of them is always faith, while the other can be intelligence, arcane, or even strength. These kinds of seals are affected by diminishing returns much earlier, providing harsher scaling drops and a faster maturity when it comes to investment limits. This is expected because when we use hybrid seals, we should invest into both of the scaling stats equally, instead of specializing in only one. Backloaded seals are very special. They show an initial disregard for diminishing returns. In fact, the more levels you put into faith, the more their scaling increases. Seemingly, they are unaffected by drops in scaling power, especially in the later levels of the stats. That said, they do have a limit and a cap. Once you reach this cap, their scaling power completely vanishes. These seals do not have a gradual effect from diminishing returns. Instead, it is sudden, drastic, and it happens at the very end of the stat investment. Let's shift our focus to the actual charts. We have 3 sets of charts which represent the 3 groups of seals that we just went over. We will be using the finger seal plus 25 as an example for a standard seal. Then there's the claw mark seal plus 25 as an example of the hybrid seals. And finally, we will be using the Earth Tree seal plus 10 as an example of backloaded seals. In each group, these charts on the top will show the correlation between your faith stat and the total incantation scaling of the corresponding seal. In other words, what is the total incantation scaling of each seal at each level of faith. On the bottom, you will see the correlation between your faith stat and the incantation scaling increase of the corresponding seal. In other words, how much actual incantation scaling we get each time that we level up our faith. As I always say, it is important to look at the shape of the charts. Starting with the finger seal, we can see that we get either 3 or 4 incantation scaling per level very consistently, with only one instance of a 2 incantation scaling increase up to level 60. Once we hit this level, the scaling drops to an additional 1 or 2 incantation scaling per level, with many more cases of 2 per level. This continues up to level 80. After this level, the scaling power drops again. This time we continue to get 1 or 2 incantation scaling per level, but there are many more instances of only 1 per level instead of 2. From this data, it is clear to see that this seal and those that follow a similar pattern have 2 clear soft caps. one at level 60 and another one at level 80. After level 80, it is not worth investing more points into faith, as we would not get much more benefit from them. Moving on to the Clawmark seal, this is a hybrid scaling seal, and it is very clear to see from its charts. We notice that this seal gets 3 or 4 incantation scaling per faith level up until we reach level 30. After this level, we begin to get either 1 or 2 incantation scaling per level up until we reach level 45. From here on, the incantation scaling really plummets as we begin to get only 1 or 0 incantation scaling per level. On top of that, we can see that about half of the levels from 45 to 99 faith give this seal no improvements at all. From this data, we can clearly establish that this seal and others of the hybrid group have a very clear soft cap at level 30 and another one at level 45. This makes sense, as we will be increasing the incantation scaling by also increasing the second stat that these seals can take advantage of. Finally, let's talk about the Erdtree seal and backloaded seals. With these seals, the more you level up faith, the more scaling they get, of course, until they reach their cap. This is very easy to see with this example. The Erdtree seal has a very high faith requirement at 40, so it was easy to assume that it would be a backloaded seal. If we look at its chart, the Erdtree seal gets a solid 3 incantation scaling per level consistently with a single instance of 4 points up until level 60. And then, after this level, the incantation scaling power increases as it begins to get 4 incantation scaling per level each and every level until you reach 80. After this, the scaling power completely evaporates and it only gives either 1 or 0 incantation scaling per level, with multiple levels providing no increase whatsoever. From this data, we can see that the backloaded seals have a consistent incantation scaling power that suffers an increase at the later levels of scaling. Once that burst of increase is over, the scaling power completely disappears. Through the chart, we can see that there is only one soft cap for the Erdtree seal and others like it. It is level 80. After going through the weapon scaling and the incantation scaling that Faith provides for our characters, we can't help but notice that there is a lot of variation in the data. Weapons scale differently than incantations, and even more complicated is the fact that incantation seals scale differently among themselves, depending on what kind of seal they are. All in all, it can be a bit confusing. For this reason, I want to simplify the choices that you have and provide you with some basic guidelines that you can follow in order to always obtain the maximum benefit from your faith investments. The first thing I want to go over is how much total faith a character should have. For this, I believe that the most important thing is to determine if your character will focus mostly on melee combat or on spell casting. There are a lot of good melee weapons that take advantage of faith scaling. We can infuse a lot of weapons down the sacred and flame art paths as well. If the main source of damage for your character will be melee attacks, then I recommend that you level up faith up to level 50. This will maximize your melee damage power while also giving you many extra levels to put into other stats that will benefit your playstyle. On the other hand, if you are making a character that will focus mostly on casting incantations, then we will be taking advantage of some seals that obtain great power from higher levels of faith. For this playstyle, I definitely recommend a full 80 faith investment. Remember, 50 faith for melee, 80 faith for caster. The other thing that I want to simplify is the matter of the incantation seals. Different kinds of seals have different scaling and their power levels vary greatly depending on how much faith your character has. This can sometimes make it difficult to understand which is the best seal to use. To resolve this issue, I offer you an easy to understand list of which seal is the best at what level of faith. The first thing to note is quite obvious, but it should be stated. If you're planning to make some sort of hybrid character, then use the seal corresponding to your hybrid stats. This means the Clawmark seal for Strength Faith the Dragon Communion seal for Arcane Faith, and the Golden Order seal for Intelligence Faith. Again, this is obvious, but these will provide the best scaling when using the correct combination of hybrid stats. With that out of the way, if you're planning on making a pure Faith character, then you will be happy to know that the Incantation seal progress in Elden Ring is very simple. From levels 10 Faith to 26 Faith, the best seal to use is the Finger Seal. This is the starting seal for some classes, and it can be easily found at the Round Table Hold Merchant. Now, from 27 Faith to 68 Faith, the best seal that you can use is the Godslayer seal, especially if you use Godslayer incantations. This seal will carry you throughout the whole mid-game, and it can be conveniently located at Stormveil Castle, one of the first areas in the game. This will ensure a comfortable transition from the beginning to the mid-game. Finally, from 69 Faith to 99 Faith, the best seal that you can use is the Erdtree seal. For these levels, this is the best seal in the game. Since most Faith caster builds will end at 80 Faith, this is the most dependable incantation seal to guarantee power. Faith is my favorite stat in the game. It gives you access to great damage, both in weapons and incantations, as well as great defense and support tools. Not only this, but it is a stat that gives you access in one way or another to every single damage type in the game, as well as all status effects that we can take advantage of. Faith is the stat that brings you power through options and opportunity. It lets you adapt to your situation and to your environments. It is also this incredible versatility that makes it perfect as a candidate for multiple hybrid builds. Strength Faith, Intelligence Faith, Arcane Faith are all very good examples of where Faith fits in a hybrid. In my opinion, this is also a perfect candidate for the best stat in the game, because no matter what kind of playstyle you have, Faith has an answer for your problems. And honestly, in the lands between, answers are very hard to come by. Thank you very much for your time, and I do hope I get to see you on the next one.